When you ask ChatGPT a question, it does 175 billion calculations in order to give you the answer. So maybe use your calculator in order to do the 2 + 2 thing. Those calculations are done in a data center, and these data centers are often owned and operated by major players like Microsoft, Meta, Amazon, and Google. AI consumes so much electricity that this is quickly becoming a huge bottleneck for the major players like Amazon and Microsoft. And Microsoft have even taken the step as to hiring nuclear scientists in order to figure out the power problem in data centers. Before we get deeper into this problem, I need to explain what a data center is. So a data center is just a physical location where servers are stored. So if you think about the cloud, for example, whenever you upload something to the cloud, it's not actually in the cloud, it's in a physical location in a server somewhere. A lot of these servers in Europe, for example, are in the Netherlands or the UK, whereas in the US it's in Virginia. One of the main reasons that this is becoming such a big problem now is that the hardware that AI runs on requires a whole lot more power than applications that don't run on AI do. And if you want to learn more about this, you can watch one of the videos on semiconductors and AI that we've already made. The power problem is so big that in countries like Ireland, the governments are actually telling AWS or Amazon AWS that they aren't allowed to spin up more GPUs because they're afraid that the power cost will simply be too great.
We Irish, look at the Irish. Yeah. Of course, if it isn't the potato famine, what is it? Oh, it's GPUs, man. Taking all the power, making it more expensive for us Mickeys just to live. Typical. Always has to be something.
I know it sounds strange to say that the power demand is going to be too great, but what I mean when I say that is that the power prices for normal individual citizens like you and me would be higher just because someone asking ChatGPT what is 2 + 2. I find this extra interesting that people are saying this in Europe, because Europe at the moment has 3% of the H100 GPUs that Nvidia has been selling all of last year. And even China, that has an import ban on the stuff, has more of these GPUs than Europe has. And Europe is now even curtailing AI development and AI usage by saying there's not enough power. So Europe as a nation, or not as a nation, but Europe as a place is simply like not going to make it. And to make matters worse, do you know what the Germans did? They turned off their nuclear power plants and started burning coal instead. So you have a couple of industries that need a lot more power because, as everyone knows, Germany used to be the powerhouse of Europe where absolutely everything was produced. And now they're not going to build more data centers either because they're using coal to run everything instead of natural gas or nuclear. Okay, let's calm down for a second. Let's look north to Northern Europe, so Sweden, Norway, Finland, Denmark. In these countries, electricity is notoriously cheap, and that's because of hydropower. Because these countries are almost self-reliant on energy, so they don't need to use external sources like natural gas or nuclear. But very typical for these countries is that they don't want to put a lot of this huge infrastructure where they live. There are a couple of data centers, for example, in the Oslo region that are actually embedded into mountains, which is pretty cool. But of course you don't have unlimited mountains, so you can't put data centers in every mountain. Looking back down to Central Europe, you could say, well, the Netherlands have typically had a lot of data centers. Yes, they have, but now the farmers are getting really angry, and Microsoft have been trying to get a data center up there for a couple of months now, which has been put on hold due to a neighbor dispute of all things. Even with just 3% of the most advanced GPUs even being in Europe, people are still getting angrier and angrier about data center build-out and power consumption. But this isn't actually a uniquely European problem. It's not that much better in the US either. 2 years ago, US grid planners estimated that the electricity demand would increase by 2.6% every year. That has now almost doubled to 4.7% increase per year, and 81% of that entire demand increase is driven by data centers, and by data centers I also mean driven by AI. I'm going to try to put those numbers into perspective. So Bloomberg is estimating that the grid requires a $20 trillion overhaul in order to support the green energy transition. And if you remember from 2023, I think it was in 2023 at least, there was a campaign going on for banning gas stoves, or gas stoves using natural gas. And there are about 60 million homes in the US that uses natural gas as of today. And if all of those were to switch and use electricity instead, the power increases would be a lot higher. We clearly have a power problem, both in the US and in Europe. So what are we supposed to do about this? Well, you could go the route of installing even more fossil fuel. So, for example, in the US, you could install more natural gas pipelines and stuff like that to get power to data centers and power everywhere, essentially. But, of course, we're in an energy transition where we're moving away from fossil fuels, not increasing the use of fossil fuels, like the Germans. But there's a problem in relying on renewables as well, because wind and solar are intermittent energy sources. And if there's one thing that stuff like data centers needs, it's stable power supply. One of the solutions to this power problem that I find interesting and a lot of other tech people are looking at is the use of nuclear. Nuclear does have its own set of problems, and one of them is that the nuclear power plants are huge, and they're a regulatory nightmare to build, and that makes sense because people think that they pollute a lot and that the smoke that comes out of them is pollutive. It's actually not smoke, it's water vapor and steam. And Mr. Burns from The Simpsons or the guys from Chernobyl have probably not made the best effort to sell in nuclear power to the regular person. I think this perception is changing, both with the regular person and with tech people. Because earlier in April this year, 2024, Oklo, a company that makes SMRs, which is small modular reactors, sold 500 megawatts of power to Equinix, which is a data center builder and designer. Fun fact, that company is in a reverse merger with a SPAC called ALCC, which is owned and operated by none other than Sam Altman of OpenAI. Okay, quick 20-second, what even is a SPAC? So a SPAC is a special purpose acquisition company. And the whole purpose of a SPAC is to buy a private company and put it on a stock exchange. I think we need to spend a little bit of time at least talking about what a great investor Sam Altman actually is. Because this guy managed to become a billionaire off of investing in AI, but not investing in the company that he runs, which is OpenAI, which is arguably one of the most valuable companies in the world. Okay, so that's the first one. He runs OpenAI, which is one of the most powerful companies in the world. He also has a huge stake in Reddit, which is one of the most important companies when it comes to getting training data for AI. And he's also now on the owner side of a nuclear power company that is going to run data centers as well. He also has a direct or indirect influence in Microsoft, and in addition, he also wants to raise $7 trillion to solve the compute problem, which means he wants $7 trillion to make more chips, which I guess would increase power demands even more. The guy is literally on all sides of the AI play. Normally at the end of these videos, I tell you something about where you should invest and how you should put your money. But in this case, that can actually be kind of difficult because it's very not easy for a private individual such as yourselves and myself to get in on SMR plays or nuclear power plays early in the beginning. But what you can do is invest in utilities or utility companies. So for example, in North Virginia in the US, the company that supplies most of the electricity there says that 20% of their demand is coming from data centers, and they estimate that to increase with 28% until 2030. In addition, of course, if Microsoft is building 2 data centers per week, and that's 2021 number, so in reality it's probably a lot more, there are other companies that do data center stuff, for example Vertiv or Equinix, that also are interesting to look at. And no matter which side of this you're on, even if you think that the energy problem is real or it's not, then investing in semiconductors or stuff like Microsoft is good anyway. If you still think that nuclear power is too dangerous to be run by humans, then I actually have a video about humanoid robots that could do that for you, which you could watch, that will tell you everything you need to know about the big players in the robotics industry.